Good morning. Well, good afternoon for all of you in Europe. Good morning for us here in Atlantic Canada. I'm thrilled to be here this morning, and thank you so much, James, and to the Trinity Center for Literary and Cultural Translation for creating this space for Sue, Georgette, and I to chat this morning. My name is Danielle. I'm a PhD student at Trinity, working with Acadian literature. And I'm also the editor of the translation collection for Éditions Personnelles that published the translation that Georgette did of Océan. I'll introduce our two guests today, and from there we'll launch into a conversation. And forgive me for reading part of this. I just don't want to miss anything from these two very fabulous women. Sue Goyette lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and she's that city's poet laureate. She's published a novel and 8 collections of poetry, including Ocean in 2013, for which she was a finalist for the Griffin Poetry Prize and winner of the 2015 Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia Masterworks Arts Award. These distinctions are just a few of the many local and national awards in an illustrious career as a poet. Sue teaches creative writing at Dalhousie University in Halifax. Georgette LeBlanc, bienvenue Georgette, is a poet, writer, and translator. She has published 4 lyrical novels. She's received several awards, including also the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia Masterworks Award and the Prix Littéraire Champlain. She was named Canada's Parliamentary Poet Laureate in 2018-2019, and her translation of Sue Goyette's poetry collection, Ocean, was published in 2020 and won the Governor General's Literary Award for Translation last June. She has a poetry collection coming out in the spring or summer sometime next year. And Sue, I'd love to know if you've got some work coming out as well. I know you've been really busy in the last few years, so we can talk about that. I'm just going to share my screen quickly because I'd like to show you where we are joining you from today. And you should be able to see this. So those are just a few titles by Sue Goyette, previous work that she's published, and Georgette LeBlanc as well. And so we're joining you from Atlantic Canada and Acadie, which is comprised of, well, Atlantic Canada is comprised of the 4 provinces of Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick on Canada's east coast. And Acadie represents, which we'll talk about today, it represents more or less the French-speaking population of that region. And the works that we'll be talking about we'll be talking about a lot about these 2 locations. So Halifax, the capital of Nova Scotia, where Sue is based, and Baie Sainte-Marie, where Georgette is from. And so I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, so welcome to both of you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, just unmuted myself. Yeah.
Sue, I'd like to start with you, and if you could tell us about how Ocean began and maybe what your relationship with the Atlantic at the foot of the city of Halifax is like.
Sure. First of all, thank you for this hosting this amazing conversation, and for Trinity College for being such a great spot for us all to convene all over the world. I think my relationship with the ocean has been a long one. I met it when I was very young and learned how to swim in it, and saw many of its strange creatures, and always had I was always awestruck by it, but also humbled by it. And it kind of served as a wildness in my life always, because there were talks of, hurricanes where the ocean would take the roads over, how it just kind of moved along with us, but didn't always behave, always hasn't intrigued me. And so I was in the mountains. I was in Banff doing a writing retreat, and had this dream of this woman singing, and I wasn't paying attention. and she stomped her foot and said, "You pay attention, I am the ocean." And I woke up that morning and just started writing and didn't stop till I was finished the collection. But the collection came like ocean. Sometimes it was calm and sometimes it was pretty rough, and sometimes it was deep and sometimes it was just white capping. And but I feel very, very in tune with the ocean, and moved here at the edge of the state we call Canada, in Halifax, the land of Mi'kma'ki, unceded territory of the Mi'kma'ki Nation, just to be close to that wildness, because I find it really compelling, and it keeps me kind of aligned and real.
Thank you. And Georgette, I wonder from you, how did the translation come about? And maybe because you grew up by the ocean too, and we'll talk about that too and how it influenced your language, but how did the translation come about and what's your relationship with the Atlantic?
I don't exactly remember how it exactly happened, how the project came to my attention, how I'd heard of Sue Goyette, was a fan of Sue Goyette. Sue Goyette's a big deal. And but yeah, so that's editorial sort of meeting. I think Sue and Serge, another poet who's also, right, I don't know, there are meetings, there's like luck, there's all kinds of things that happen. And I was given the opportunity to actually translate this wonderful book, and I took it. A little shyly at first, humbly. I'm still humbled by it, but yeah, anyway, I did grow up, I didn't grow up by the ocean, but by the bay, which is La Baie Sainte-Marie, which is not quite the ocean yet, but it's still a big enough body of water that when you're next to it or by it, you are kind of, you just, well, I feel better because it's a wide expanse of nothing and everything all at the same time. And I used to, I regularly every day after writing many hours, usually in the I'm a morning writer, I would, well, I say that lately I've been writing at night, but I love the morning. I would go around noon to an area we call Le Petit Bois, which was close to my house, and it's like a little trails, little like forest right next to the bay. And I swear to God, every day there was something different about La Baie, and it was like medicine. It was really good for me. Like it just felt really good. So something that would seem or appear to someone else as just kind of almost boring, you know, just this flat expanse of water, this never-ending horizon, was, as Sue said, like wildness. And every day was just different. Colors were different. The way the wind was working with the waves was, the water was different. Also the tide, and very impressive. It's not a sweet thing. La Baie is not sweet. It means beautiful, but I always felt it was just like me. I'm sure Joe can understand, and Danielle as well. Danielle's getting.
I do think you're beautiful, Georgette.
Thank you.
And I should add that Baie Sainte-Marie too, it's a region, we talk a lot about the tides. It's at the mouth of the Bay of Fundy, which has the highest tides in the world. So there's really this
supercharged energy, I find.
Exactly.
I might be making it up, but that's how it feels.
And that strength really does change the landscape quite extensively every day, as you said. And I could talk about hours for that about this region, because I think it's one of the most beautiful in the world. But why don't I'd like to invite you both to do a reading. So Sue, if you want to go first, this is poem number 8. The poems are numbered. They don't have any titles. And so you're welcome to talk about that decision if you like. And then we'll do Georgette's reading in the French translation afterwards.
Okay.
I'd like to hear about that decision, actually. I don't think we actually talked about that.
About the decision of numbering them?
Yes.
Yeah,
Rather,
okay.
and no page numbers. I love that.
Numbers. Yeah, no, I wanted the text to make operational that idea of all that you're talking about, all the all the things you're attributing to the ocean, the kind of
Mhm.
movement. And so having titles to me would like perforate the movement of the whole text. And
Yeah.
so my publisher, um, Andrew at Steve's at Gaspro Press, who make beautiful books and as a letterpress press, um, said that the reader needs to navigate the book somehow. There has to be some kind of landmark, like we are near the ocean. We need to see some sort of. And I'm like, no, we got to lose sight of the land. He said, no, we're not going to lose sight of the land. So this was a compromise. And then he also at the back did the index of the first line, so people could reference how to move in the book rather than feeling like they were lost at sea. And I thought that makes sense. It's more of I think a structural or the way the poems can potentially move. But for me, they just came all at like in order, and I didn't want to slow that the force they were making down. So this was like, I guess, a practical decision. So this is number 8. The trick to building houses was making sure they didn't taste good. The ocean's culinary taste was growing more sophisticated, and occasionally its appetite was unwieldy. It ate boats and children, the occasional shoe, pants, a diamond ring, hammers. It ate promises and rants. It snatched up names like peanuts. We had a squadron of cooks specifically catering to its needs. They stirred vats of sandals and sunglasses. They peppered their songs with pebbles and house keys. Quarts of bottled song were used to sweeten the brew. Discussions between preschool children and the poets were added for nutritional value. These cooks took turns pulling the cart to the mouth of the harbor. It would take 4 of them to shoulder the vat over, tipping the peeled promises, the baked dreams into its mouth. And then the ocean would be calm. It would sleep. Our mistake was thinking we were making it happy.
Nice.
I love that poem. It's one of my favorite in the collection. I think it's a great selection for the reading this morning because I think it speaks to a lot of what the collection as a whole is and does, and how powerful it is. And I think it also comes back to what you were saying earlier about the wildness, which we'll come back to. So Georgette, would you like to read the French?
Yeah. La trick à bâtir des maisons était de faire sûr qu'elles goûtaient mauvais. L'océan avait de plus en plus faim pour de quoi de bon. Puis des fois, son appétit était mal commode. Il mangeait des bateaux puis des enfants, un soulier des fois, et cette pile-là, des culottes, une bague de diamants, des marteaux. L'océan mangeait des promesses puis des insultes. Il pognait des nains comme des peanuts. J'avais un escadron de cuisiniers pour y faire à manger. Ils brassions des cuves, des sandales puis des lunettes à soleil. Ils pimentions une soupe avec des cailloux puis des clés de maison. Ils sucrient l'infusion avec des chansons embouteillées. Les discussions entre les enfants à la petite école puis les poètes étaient ajoutées à la soupe pour leur valeur nutritionnelle. Les cuisiniers prenaient un tour à haler la charrue jusqu'à l'embouchure du Havre. Ça prenait 4 cuisiniers pour épauler les cuves. Ils vidions les promesses puis les rêves épluchés dans la gaule de l'océan. Avec ça, l'océan était calme, l'océan dormait. Mais j'avions tort de croire que je rendais l'océan heureux.
I could listen to both of you read all day. I really, really could. For anyone who is with us and understands or reads or speaks French, you may have noticed some differences in the French of Georgette's Océan. And I'd like to talk about that, Georgette, a little bit, because I think it makes the translation really, really special. So it's an Acadian French. I mentioned Acadie at the beginning. It's the cultural identity, if you want, of much of the French-speaking population in Atlantic Canada. Would you like to talk about your linguistic choices and why you chose to translate in an Acadian French as opposed to a standard or a normative French, as much as that can exist?
Mm-hmm. Well, the choice kind of, I started off with the translation, a more sort of academic translation of Ocean, and into a French that would, I call it like normative French or modern French that's spoken in much of La Francophonie today, as much as I could, because, well, as much as I could, I don't even know what that means. That's what I did. And it didn't even, it worked. I shared some of that work. The Fry Festival, just kind of read a few examples of that, but also read examples of another translation, another version I tried later, which was the in Acadian French, and the Acadian French version worked better, I think, because of the tone I was able to get to in Acadian French and was less able to get to in standard French or normative French. And I always say that poets never really write in any language. You know, we write in our own language. We write in our version of whatever language we're speaking. So in a sense, I was maybe allowing myself this sort of poetic freedom that I live by. It's sort of my only rule. And which was like, just do what feels right, what really feels right. I checked in with Sue because I was a bit nervous about it, because translation is a different thing in my opinion. It's not I'm not writing a book. I have this duty, and I felt a duty to really honor Sue's work and to help Ocean travel also, because translation has helped me allowed me to discover authors that I wouldn't have read otherwise. Translation's been a gift to me. So I really wanted to honor Sue's work, but I couldn't deny myself. So at one point I was almost thinking, well, I'm either gonna do it in Acadian French. If Sue's against it, then or doesn't feel it's right, then I just won't do it, because it won't work. You know, it won't, not with me anyway. And there are 50 billion translators out there who will do it, who can, do a great job as well. So I just won't do it. So that's kind of where I was. Though Acadian French is it's a complicated story, but in essence, it's sort of it's French that's been spoken in different areas of the Atlantic provinces by Acadians, and French that's coming from 17th century France, what 17th century France looked like linguistically. So there's all kinds of different accents coming into the picture, grammatical structures which are completely different, conjugations, everything. It's not quite Gaelic in English. It's not a completely different language, though. I argue that it's French. It's just an old French. It's like if everyone started speaking medieval English, which I really don't know what to compare it to, but that's part of my struggle. It's sort of difficult, but I don't know if that's clear to you, if everyone's understanding what I'm saying, but.
Well, I think so. And
it was an oral, a language, we call it an oral French, because it hasn't really been codified. There's no normative Acadian French. It's not taught in schools or anything like that, but it's spoken within the communities today. It's not a dead language. It's actually still alive. It's still happening. So yeah.
It's very much alive. And I think you've talked about Acadian Frenches in terms of accents, and there are different accents where we can all understand each other, but your accent and my accent really isn't the same, and someone from northeastern New Brunswick, northwestern New Brunswick would be completely different as well. And I think we were talking about this sociolinguistic study of the Baie Sainte Marie region that just came out a few months ago that also positions Acadian, which is the accent / language of the Baie Sainte Marie region, as an accent. So I think that's really interesting. And we had a lot of discussions when we were working on this book too about how far to go with that accent, because in the reading that you did, there was the word trier, which is cuillère, but my grandparents would have pronounced it trier, and I think it's still pronounced trier in the Baie Sainte Marie region. So can you talk a little bit about what that felt like for you, and how did you determine how far to go in integrating that accent in the text?
I tried to keep, as with my own work, actually, what I've been publishing so far in French is to create a kind of normative Acadian language. So I'm choosing to write sounds that I hear in different areas of, like, so northern, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, not just in La Baie Sainte Marie where I grew up. So for example, the on sound for pain in where I grew up, pain become like bread, pain becomes pun often. Okay, this on sound. That sound is not heard anywhere else in Acadie, which is, I find that really interesting. I don't know why, but so I chose not to include it. Not because I want to shun the sound from the French Acadian language, but just because I wanted to try and include as many people as I could. And so it's already a struggle sometimes when you read the text, because you're not used to seeing these sounds written. Like cuillère, for example, because we use the sound ch for that k sound, cuillère, ch, I chose to transcribe that sound, to use it, to include it in the writing. Because I hear it here in Moncton, I hear it in northern New Brunswick, I hear it, I'm in PI, I'm sure it's used pretty much everywhere in Acadie. So anyway, there's a lot to be said. It's picking and choosing, and Danielle was from a different area of, she grew up in Moncton, in the Moncton area, Sud-Est. Serge Patrice, the director, the editor is from the Madawaska area, which is a completely different area, northern New Brunswick, and where the accent is slightly different as well. So we were trying to kind of work with everyone, trying to sort of not, just to include everyone, to try and make the writing as seamless as possible, which is not easy.
It sounds like it was a bit of an intuitive process for
absolutely.
You deciding what to, like, where to put the TH to create that sound in writing and where not to create the sound in writing.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, it is intuitive, but it's not, it's intuitive, informed by years of thinking about it, listening, writing, reading about it. It's intuitive, but it's not an innocent it's an intellectual intuitiveness. I don't know. I haven't written much about it because it's been such a struggle, and I still struggle with it because it's not easy. I mean, I obviously care, and I do it because I want to, but it's not easy.
And
It's not
I mean,
easy.
it's, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I just said something silly. Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't, but I was just going to say that I think you used the word innocent, and it's not. You've thought about this a lot, and actually, you did your PhD in Louisiana University of Lafayette, if I'm not mistaken, and I heard in an interview that you translated your own work for that because you felt like you needed to have, but you translated into English, not into a normative French, but you felt like you needed that tension between the two languages.
Well, I felt like, no, well, actually, my argument was very poorly written introduction, and it's not anybody's fault but my own, because, and that's a whole other story. But because I felt that in order for it to be my thesis, Alma, for it to be an authentic performance, literary performance, I had to include an Anglophone voice, because much of my literary loves were Anglo-Canadian writers. So had I not read many writers I had read when I was growing up in English, it just happened that way. I fell in love with so many writers, so many texts in English. So how could I not also have that? It was so frustrating when I started publishing, not being able to share my work with my friends. A lot of my friends who couldn't read French. And I mean, I wasn't going to stop writing in French. It was like, learn French. But still, and not just that, my peers, my peers, I consider my peers, this other community of writers who publish in a different language that I read all the time, but they don't have access to my text because they're not translated into English. So I did that my own. It was an argument, or a poorly constructed argument, about community, like a sort of a literary community and my own identity. So, which is a tricky thing in an Acadian context, you know what I mean? Where you're fighting for a language that you really care about, that you love, that you don't want to see die. But you can't deny this other part of you who loves, the force that is also working against what you love. So it's just really, it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is. And Sue, I see you nodding. How do you feel about the French that Georgette chose? And I know you get by in French. I know you're better than you think you are. But can you talk to us about the how you felt about this translation?
Well, first, I just want to acknowledge the space Georgette is kind of defining for us, which feels like a complex homecoming in how you're thinking about language, for how you are trying to be hospitable to the very different communities that are speaking this language in their own vernacular. So there's an active hospitality to the writing, as well as kind of a radical reclamation and guarding of the language, which feels decolonizing. So it's a very righteous and potent site to be writing from. And I understand not even I don't think that, I think if anyone can talk about it, it's you, Georgette. But I also think there's a part of this way of being on the planet right now that is defying language because it's such a new way of being. So I'm just offering you that. I was delighted when I was kind of in company with Georgette, as Georgette was working with the more traditional, formalized, and kind of settler English French, the kind of, state French, I want to say, which is, but
which doesn't really exist. It sort of, it's like a poster French.
Yeah, it's a poster
Which is
French.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe
this
it.
systemic French, right? It's kind of like academic English, right? It's like we use it, but I mean, then we have to recover from it and like put our tongues against a tree or something. So I appreciated how you approach the text in its original language with the the respect of like, okay, I'm going to put this language in this language. And that was the way I would have started. It would have been like painting a room. This is how I'm going to do it. But then
Mhm.
you're painting the room that is like acting like an ocean. And it's like so what I really deeply am grateful for is how not my work, but the poetry that kind of is accumulated in my work, not by me, but just that happens, as you know, however, that the poetry in you responded to the poetry in that. And as
Yeah,
poets, we talked about it, but it was kind of out of our hands. And so
yeah.
I think we both were, I think what I love about this project is that we're both at a point in our writing practices to understand and be humbled by the point when we bow to that and say, whoo, and celebrate it. Like, thank God it's still burning, right? So that's how I felt. I was like, I see how your methods and your method of inquiry makes sense to me, and I
Mm.
can see why you're ditching it so that you can actually swim with this
Mhm. Mhm.
in a way that you feel comfortable. Because what I liked what you said was you were choosing a language where you could you could move with the language in a way that you were comfortable so that you could reach the far shore of it, that
Mhm.
I think is more about your imaginative reach and your sense of home in that reach than
Mhm.
trying to do it in something that's too buckled.
Mhm. And there's wit, there's irony, there's a lot of that in the text, in the original text, and there's a sense of humor that I recognized immediately. And so, but I didn't feel that in the more sort of academic French, which I speak and know as well, but is almost, I don't want to say foreign because it's not, but it's a different experience of language. It is for me personally. And so
Right,
it's just
totally.
a completely different thing. And I would venture to say that most writers, if any writer in any language, it's always the same sort of situation. You have an academic version of the language, which is useful because
Yeah.
it sets standards and it helps move it along. You know what I mean? But poets aren't really working from that place.
No. And that's
That
great.
we need, we're aware, we work with it, everything, but that's
Yeah, yeah.
not where the poetry's coming from.
Yeah, and that straight translation is more um, in respect to the writer rather than what the work is doing. Where there's, do you know Nicole Brassard's three definitions? So then there's the middle ground where there's more play and blur and risk and smile, she says. And then
Mhm.
there's the kind of real, she calls it transformance, where the writer just goes into the kind of ecosystem of the original text and then comes out sputtering with their own version, right? So
Mhm.
I think you did a little of the second and a little of the third way. And I think, I mean, I'm happy thinking if you submerged in my text and came out knowing something more about your writing,
Yeah.
this is how it works. We're cross pollinating and it's like win-win, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
We we have a question from the chat that is for Georgette. Je vais la lire en français. Ne craignez-vous pas que la langue que vous utilisez dans la traduction, qui est absolument magnifique, ne vole la vedette du texte dessous, de son rythme et de ses thèmes? So just to translate quickly,
Yeah.
the question is about whether Georgette was worried that the language used in the translation would kind of take away from Sue's text and its rhythm and themes.
Well, no, it was the best way to get to the language and to the themes. That was kind of, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like what I was afraid of, which is this, or not afraid of, but what really gets tiresome is what happens with my own writing, with my own work, is that people just stop and talk about the language and not talk about the actual text, what I'm saying. So it's that's the risk I'm taking every time. But honestly, I really feel like that's yeah, that's the language. It's like, no, no. Why it, no, I'm not.
I think it comes back to what Sue was saying, and I think also I don't know. I mean, I absolutely do not have a say in this, but I agree with you. I think that language, because of the close ties, which I think relate back to the ocean and the sea and our relationship with it, whatever body of water that is, I think that's where the links come from, and the language, I think I know Acadian language has been shaped a lot by the sea. Studies have been done around this where Acadian French has a lot of words really that have a specific connotation to the sea that we now use in other contexts. I'm thinking of chaviré, for example, or amare, which we use all the time in contexts other than the maritime context. So I think that language is perfect. I think it just works.
It's just that the only problem is no one really understands. So, and I do it anyway. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm not really sure if it's the right thing to do, but I'm doing it anyway. And so she's right, that lady who pose la question, elle a raison de poser la question, because it's like what you want as a writer. And I always, I was telling my students sort of this as well, is like, as a writer, as an artist, as a creator, you want to communicate to as many people as you can. That's the point. If not, you would keep your manuscripts in your house, locked away in a secret door, whatever, behind a secret door, and just keep it to yourself. So obviously you're trying to communicate something to as many people as you can. So imagine the frustration, when you're using a language. In a language, it's not like music. Music is a different a discipline. You have all kinds of other things coming in that help the message, that help the text. So you cannot understand the lyrics to a song and still be moved by a song because of everything else that's coming into it. Poetry, writing is a tough audience because there's nothing. There's just, it's on the page. That's it. That's all. And, good luck with it. So I'm doing all the wrong things for maybe, but I'm doing it and I'm doing it anyway.
I have a student who's getting to know her Indigenous kind of culture and community and language, and doesn't know her language, and is reading in it to introduce the sound of her language to her body, because her body has a memory of it. And I'm thinking that the people who are reading your work who might not know the language, they're embodying the reading, this great service you're doing for the future of the language.
That's kind of it. Or I don't know if it's a service, but it's definitely,
I'm going to call it a service, because you're holding
That's
space.
The only thing I can do.
And I think if you're noting an idea of success that's kind of linked to capitalism and commerce, then you're going to be sad, and we're going to have lots of coffees together. But if you're
That's it. I'm going to stop calling myself a poet. I'll be a fraud to myself. I can't do that.
So
that's
you
step
back and you look at the long look, because it's not, you're not going to know how your work is going to move, when it will move, when it's needed in the future. So all you can do is turn up to be who you are and how you are. So I see it as you're doing exactly what you need to do in a time where not a lot of space is being given to gratitude and honoring what you're doing and the hard work it is.
Thank you.
I completely agree with Sue, and I think it is being recognized. We were talking about this before the event started. It is being recognized more widely as well. You won the Governor General's Literary Award for translation for 2020, but last summer, because everything was delayed. So it is making waves.
Because one thing I found, that just a personal experience. I grew up in a small, in a relatively, not in an urban landscape, let's say, au village. And curiously enough, there was this, university in the smack dab in the middle of this village, which was a blessing. Anyway, but I grew up hearing, speaking, living in a language. And I also, at one point, understood that if I wanted to say something intelligent, I had to say it in a different language. I had to say it in a different kind of French. And I didn't appreciate the message because it made no sense to me. So why is my mother's French? Why is my father's French? Why is this community's French? It's not just a mother tongue thing. It's the community's French. Not valid. Why can we not say intelligent things, quote unquote, in this other French, whose accent is different and stuff, is quite radically different than the standard French? Why isn't it not? Why? This has been my main question for years. It just didn't, it felt wrong. It felt, just doesn't make sense. Like a very,
violent, right? It's violent.
It is.
Let's call it what it is. It's violent.
And you have to, and especially because in France, you can live on a farm and you go to school and you learn if everyone's speaking with, yes, there are different accents, there are different, but everyone's speaking, everyone has got, everyone's speaking the same kind of French, à la base. Quebec, whatever, everywhere. There's a big group of people going to school, learning the same and speaking all speaking the same French. In Acadie, in southwestern Nova Scotia, in Moncton, in northern New Brunswick, people are speaking a different French with their families, with their people. When they're dying, they're speaking this other French. What the heck, to the point where they may not even understand really a normative French coming from France, a different kind of French. How is that not problematic? You know what I mean? Like, how is it okay to say that French that people, like intelligent people are speaking, capable, able-bodied human beings who have children and who do all kinds of things, is not valid, can't say important things? It pissed me off.
Of course it pissed you off.
Yeah.
As it would. It's like the mainstream language is like a monoculture. It's like how we're clear cutting all the different types of trees and replacing them with one type, right? It's a violence. And that's how you eradicate diversity, and that's how you like take the white body supremacy, like blah blah blah, and yeah.
And you do not, and you stop, you stunt growth, because
and the genius of it interacting, right?
That's it, because the Acadian student learns very young that what he's been speaking with his people, in his community, in her community all this time, is invalid.
Yeah, wrong.
How do you deal with that? So it's like, okay, shit, I'm gonna put on my, you have to go to smart school. And, I wonder why, is it any surprise that they don't really feel like they feel ostracized? Oftentimes I shouldn't say they, I felt ostracized. I felt almost it was like a split personality thing. You know what I mean? Almost. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying that linguistically, you feel like you have to choose, or you have to, like, because no one explains to you no one explained to me when I was young that what I was speaking was French, just different, was an old French, the accent was different, blah, blah, blah. If I had a that explained to me younger, then I might have felt better about myself.
Yeah.
Language is a profound, we talk about mother tongue, we talk about the importance of, literacy, and it's like, well, how about, there's sort of a bridge that needs to be mended or something.
Well, that's what your work is doing.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So instead of talking about it, I try to publish. I'm publishing. I don't know. That's my grain of salt in this vast ocean of what the hellness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It's a big grain of salt. You're making a big difference. You both are in your respective.
Not even a grain of salt, but a peninsula, like a piece of land that is like crossing the kind of challenge of not being legitimized, and also the feeling of being an imposter, like getting away with something with that threat constant, which erodes your good self, right? Because you're just always vigilant and like, because you're going to be caught out any minute. So
That's it.
it's a really turbulent way to be on the planet. So I appreciate your work, is what I'm saying.
That ties in really nicely with a question in the chat, actually. C'est pour toi, Georgette. Êtes-vous l'une des premières personnes à chercher une normalisation écrite du français acadien, ou avez-vous été inspiré par d'autres auteuristes ou traductrices qui ont cherché à aussi faire ce travail pour honorer la langue et pour d'autres raisons?
Il y a d'autres textes. Il y a other auteurs acadiens comme Antonin Maillet, who published La Sagouine. So not translators, but actually writers who published in we'll call it Acadian French. So La Sagouine was a major big deal. Was a big deal, and again, was very formative. Like it really, ça m'a marqué. Ce texte-là m'a marqué, because it was the first time that that language was sort of, or I was seeing it, I was reading it on paper, and in a literary world. The only issue I had with it, the only issue, and it's not an issue with Madame Maillet, because I admire her profoundly and her whole work, but it was that it was theater. And so it was still this idea that it's okay if we're talking, but if we're saying things, intelligent things, then we have to write it in a different way, which I still, whatever. Anyway, I'll have to go to psychotherapy for a linguist. But but Antonin Maillet's La Sagouine was very important, and also Barry Ancelet's work. So neither one are translations, but both were choosing to write and not translate. So it was transcribing rather than translating, which is interesting. Transcribing, and I went more the transcribing route with Sue's work in translating it. I loved Sue's work, so I didn't want to change anything. I didn't want to rewrite or do anything like that. Transcription is trying to record what's being said. Transcription. And that's what Barry Ancelet in Louisiana, he published a book with a photographer, a friend of his, which contained a series of interviews he had done with musicians, Cajun and Creole musicians. And rather than translate their French to a normative French, that, he transcribed and published the interviews in Cajun and Creole French. And that, when I read that book at the library, when I found that book while I was doing some research, I immediately called Barry Ancelet, no word of a lie, and I didn't know him. But I said, that's why I wanted to go to Louisiana, because it moved me. It was also another moment where, okay, this person actually respects the people he's interviewing. He's not trying to translate them. He's just trying to, he loves their language. He has respect for what's going on there. And so they weren't translations, they weren't, but yeah, I would say those two works were very important.
And I'd say Antonin really Antonin Maya really paved the way, I think, for creating this ability to, or make it okay to write in the oral language. And I'd say currently, I think musicians are doing it more than writers. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that?
Well, maybe so. It's I don't know, but what was I going to say? Something it struck me with in relation to La Sagouine, and there was also Régis Brun. That's what I wanted to say. La Marie Como, another, which he actually went the extra mile. He wrote his entire novel in French. He calls it Chiac. I would say it's Acadian French because there's no English in it. But anyway, so there's a lot of the language. It's complicated. It's fascinating.
It's rich.
It's very.
Yeah,
It is.
it's complex in a great, potent way.
Exactly.
And the first poet that I fell in love with that like kind of made like a gestalt shift, I saw the world differently, was Saint Denis Garneau. And I was reading English French, the translation, but I was catching something in the whiff of French that couldn't be captured in the English, and I didn't have the language for what I knew was missing, but that's what I figured the poetry was, and that's where I wanted to kind of perch on. So it's just fascinating how language.
You were probably smelling the wine, and it was.
Yeah, no doubt, the wine and the angst for sure.
That's why my first love was with the text, not with the actual poet. I didn't, but what was his name? Neruda.
Neruda.
So Neruda, which everyone loves, and of course, how can you not? But I read the translations in, I think it was Alden Nolan's I forget, was it Alden Nolan? It can't be.
Yeah, I don't know if Nolan.
No, it wasn't Nolan. Who was it? Why did I think of Alan Nolan? Anyways, but
he's pretty important too. But yeah.
But there were but translation. Did he translate?
No, I don't think so. But I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know.
Anyway, the point is that they were in English. I read Neruda in English, and still. So after a while, I did learn a little bit of Spanish, and went back to it just for the same reason. But I was surprised. Like, it's not that it was any less or more. It was just. The English translations work,
Work. Well, and Neruda's doing something with language that kind of defies language, and that's what I'm really interested in. It's like the way you speak about, finding like inhabiting your language is the way I felt about the way I think. Like, I think in poetry and I speak in poetry. So when I go to school, people are like, "Whoa! Like, how do I put that? How do I legitimize that?" And so it's kind of a way of being or how you are rather than what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd like to read one of the comments in the chat. The space identified by Georgette is a microcosm in the advent of a world without borders. It's a terrifying first step, but there it is, our first view of it. What does it mean to both share and maintain what is vanishing in language? Thank you for enunciating this. Borderlessness is a huge theme developing for all of us, and we must understand this challenge. Here, it seems to me, we begin. And there's also a question about, and I think it relates to a conversation we were having earlier about, for you, Georgette, it was Sue's poetry and maybe an agenda that kind of pushed you to translate Océan, albeit a worthy one. Would you say do you want to respond to that?
I'm not sure I understood the...
Was there an agenda to your translation?
Oh, there's an agenda to everything I do. It's not an agenda. I don't really have agendas. My only agenda is what I've been talking about, is an agenda to myself. And I'm the worst. I'm not hard on myself. I'm really exigeant. You know what I mean? So I really want to stay true to what I feel, is like the only thing I have. I don't understand what's going on in the world today. You know what I mean? Nothing makes sense. So the only thing I can kind of, and that's what I try to tell my kids, is like, all you have is yourself, not in an egotistical, selfish way, but I mean, you have to be able to kind of navigate, go through life. You have to decide, you have to make choices. They're not always easy. So it's an agenda with myself. I'm hoping that, yeah, people will be intrigued and start, and talk about, of course, that's what everyone wants. You know what I mean? But I'm not a politician. Like, I'm not running a campaign. You know what I mean? I'm really not.
You're being true to yourself, and I
Yes.
think what you're contributing to Acadian literature, whether through your poetry or through translation, is
and in that sense,
huge.
Also, and I'm sure Sue would be d'accord, is that, yeah, with myself, and I've been engaging with literature, with, le grand L majuscule. Literature is a thing to me. It exists. It's a thing. It's industry, and then there's writers, and there's all kinds of going on. You know what I mean? It's a world. So my participation in that world, I'm wanting to work within that world as authentically as possible. And it's not, that's that's all it is. And I'm sure you feel the same way. I mean, Sue.
Yeah, I think what's at the heart of all of this is authenticity and making meaning and manifesting in how and who you are, which is a radical act when we're kind of, stuck in a 9 to 5 hurry. I think it's like stepping out of the normative expectation to insist on being who you are. And I think that's kind of what the planet needs right now.
I don't know, but that's what's happening.
There was a comment in the chat from earlier. I didn't get to it before now, but just a comment about translating Le Petit Prince into I'm sorry, I know I don't pronounce this well, Donegal dialect of Irish rather than standard Irish. It captured the personality and specialness of the Exupéry book wonderfully. I think that's a great project.
Neat.
If there are any other questions, put them now. I'm just trying to make sure I didn't get to all the comments, make sure I didn't miss any questions. But thank you. I think that's our time. I didn't get to most of my questions. We could go on forever, but this has been such a rich conversation and great for me. And I hope it was for everyone listening. But thank you so much to both of you for your generosity and your thoughtfulness. It's greatly appreciated. James, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I'd like to thank all three of you. It's been really, really interesting, and I've learned a huge amount. So that's always a sign of a really good event. So for the audience, again, thank you very much for joining us. And if you enjoyed this event, then please do join us for future events. You can find those listed on our site, which is just there on the screen. It's tcd.ie/literary-translation. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter, and also on YouTube. You can catch up on events that you may have missed if you look for TCLCT Dublin. And if you really enjoyed the event and would like to become closer to us, then we'd love to have you as part of the Friends of the Trinity Centre for Literary and Cultural Translation, which gives you all sorts of additional benefits. So hopefully we'll see you again very soon for another event. And in the meantime, I'll thank speakers today again. So Danielle was our host, and Sue Goyette and Georgette LeBlanc. Thank you very much. See you soon.